Firstly, hi everyone, but I want you to imagine yourself at 14. What were you like? What were your dreams? And what were the things that were most important to you at that age, no matter how trivial you think they are now, retrospectively looking back? When I was 14, I was one of those kids who was very quiet, and I had a very close group of friends, and that's just how I liked it. We would watch anime together. We were kind of considered like that group of nice girls, but really nerdy. And we even made a really terrible band together. So all around, 14 was a very good age for me. Aside from that, I was also a massive nerd. Ever since I was a child, I've always wanted to be a doctor, so I was always studying for my sciences, just so I could get the best grades possible and achieve that from just year 9. And that was also, I always find that quite funny that I always wanted to be a doctor because I come from the most squeamish, non-medical family you could ever imagine, even though they're very supportive. And as well as being a massive nerd, I had a big passion for music and drama. In fact, if you were to ask me what was the most important thing to me when I was 14, it was probably the school play. So, it was September 2015. I had just turned 14 in August, and I'd just started year 10. And in year 10, our school, when I was in year 10 this year, our school had decided to put on a production of Bugsy Malone. And I signed up just to be in the general cast with a few of my mates, so we could just kind of mess around, have a bit of banter, as you do in school. However, at the end of October, and this was just a couple of weeks into rehearsals, I'd begun to feel really unwell. I was constantly dizzy, and I was breathless, and I was even paler than usual, which is like a massive, massive achievement when you're this pale, naturally. And so I just did what you would normally do. My mum took me to the doctors, and we were just told it was a chest infection. So we just listened to them, had no further testing. I was given antibiotics, and I just carried on as normal. And the school play was still the most fun part of school, so I kept going in kind of just for that. But if you cut forward a few weeks, all of my initial symptoms were just getting worse and worse. I was throwing up at random times, and I was even paler than being even paler, which again is still a massive achievement. And so we just went back to the doctors, and we were told it was just another infection, and just don't worry about it, there's nothing wrong, no blood test, just antibiotics, and I was sent on my way. So I just carried on with school as normal, like I said, but each day over the coming months, I was feeling worse and worse, and it was very visible to not only my friends, but also teachers, that I was just deteriorating a lot. And I'd even started struggling to focus in school, which is a massive thing when you're such a big nerd and you find you can't suddenly get an A star. But I kept forcing myself to go in, because if there was nothing wrong with me, I was going to go in. But anyway, fast forward to February 2016, this is kind of like midway through year 10, and I'd just been doing the school play as normal. And it was the Sunday dress rehearsal before our opening performance, which was on the Wednesday of the same week. And I remember feeling the worst I'd ever felt at that point. But anyway, so this rehearsal, as I said, it was a dress rehearsal, and this was quite a big thing because some of the costumes in our production were hired, and some of the hire costumes, I was wearing one of them. And since the very, very start of all of these rehearsals, we had all been drilled into us from our drama teacher, who's really strict and really scary sometimes. Just do not get these costumes dirty, because the fine will be in the triple figures. And that is literally the quote. He said it every single week. I can't even recall him not saying it. So this was a very big deal to not get any of the costumes dirty. So anyway, aside from that, me and my friends were just sat down, we were chilling, because we had nothing to do. We weren't needed yet, but I knew that I was feeling really, really ill, and funnily enough, I knew that I was going to have one of my little nauseous spells, and I just thought, I really hope I don't have to get up anytime soon, because I will throw up, and I don't want to. So if I could just have a few more minutes sitting down, everything will be nice. But surprise, surprise, everyone got called up, because we were going to have a big cast photo with everyone in the school playing it, and I was stood right in the middle of the stage with no one in front of me to hide me, and all I could think was just how sick I felt. And I felt like I was going to collapse just walking up the 3 tiny little stairs to even get onto the stage in the first place. So I was thinking to myself, I'm going to hold it in. This is all going to be fine. I can just go be sick in the toilet afterwards, as you do casually. And the camera flashed. For the first picture, I just about managed to smile. But then 1 second later, when the second flash went off, I bent over and I vomited blood all over the stage. And I was mortified because there was a picture of it probably floating around somewhere in school to this day. And I remember everyone suddenly turned round to me and they were looking at me. And I thought, oh no, like they all know how bad I feel now. But instead, they just shouted at me, oh my God, get the higher costume off because there's going to get sick on it. It's going to get dirty. So that was a very surreal moment, but most importantly, the coat was clean, no fines in the triple figures for the higher costumes, and I just went home to recover that day. But the next day, I had the bright idea of just kind of ignoring how rough I really felt at this point, and I went back into school. But needless to say, I got sent home again because I'd nearly fainted a couple of times, and I was trying to keep it subtle because this had really just become my new norm at this point. But I just went home, and once I was told to just stay home, I decided to actually just let myself recover this time, and this was the first time I'd done it. This whole time, I think staying at home and just letting myself recover and lie down in bed, it had felt so pointless because I went to the doctors more times than I could count, and I felt really humiliated even complaining to them because they just told me I was fine. And I remember telling them I'm being sick multiple times a day, and they told me that's normal for a girl of your age with hormones. And I don't know what medical book says that, but that is far from normal. So I just let myself recover for the first time. The day after that, I couldn't walk anymore because I had no energy. And I was rushed into hospital with sepsis. And I had my first blood test since ever feeling ill in the first place. It turns out my blood counts were the lowest the hospital or any of my consultants had ever seen in anyone that was still alive. I probably should have been dead for quite a while before I had a blood test. But then the next day, I was transferred to Birmingham Children's Hospital because they really saved my life. And then I had some biopsies done and found out I had this clearly very lovely thing, acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which is an aggressive form of blood cancer. And there's some sciencey facts here if you'd like to have a read, but I'm sure no one's as nerdy as me and doesn't want to hear any of that. You love it. Thanks, Kay. So, the day after my diagnosis, I started on the 2.5-year treatment plan. And it was pretty grueling, and it was mostly just chemo and steroids. The first 6 months were very intense, and the treatment was really, really aggressive. And I found myself, I suddenly had to grow up really quickly. And it was like something clicked, and I had this new kind of self-awareness and like consciousness that I hadn't had before. And I had to ask lots of questions to try and just understand everything that was happening to me. And when you're being fed all this information from like these really, really smart, intelligent doctors, and you're just trying to wrap your head around it, I didn't even know what I was talking about half the time in the beginning. So I just had to Google for myself a lot because I felt too embarrassed to ask. But by asking one question, I found myself able to ask another question. And then I just became pretty comfortable with my new hospital environment because I was going to be there for a while. I was also bedbound for a while, so I had to kind of like half learn to walk again. But I found myself, I had to push myself mentally for that as well as physically pushing myself, but really mentally pushing myself to kind of break those barriers and that fear of trying to get walking again. But also, because I was stuck in hospital for weeks at a time, of course, I used to take in my schoolwork every single time just so I could catch up on all of the work that I was missing. I remember really vividly whenever I'd have an outpatient appointment, quite often I'd be having lumbar punctures and something called intrathecal methotrexate, which is basically where they inject it into your back. And I had it done under general anaesthetic. And as soon as I woke up, I was catching up on GCSE physics because I didn't want to miss anything. As soon as I was onto my maintenance stage of treatment, I started going back to school as much as I could, and I sat my GCSEs on time with all of my friends. And by sixth form, I was doing full days for every day that I was in. And then I finished treatment 27th of April 2018 at the end of year 12. And that was the end of that, wasn't it? although I can really joke about it a lot, it was still the hardest time of my life. And I'm still the exact same person as I was when I was 14, but I can safely say that this whole leukemia experience has definitely given me a different perspective of my own life, and I definitely look at things differently. And although I wish I'd never had to go through this, I'm really grateful that I have this new perspective on my own life. I think firstly, one of the most important things I found was how truly powerful your own mindset can be when it comes to trying to get through tough times. Because when the world feels like it's purposely turned on you and it's testing every inch of your will, there is still always something you can be grateful for. And ultimately, when bad things happen, when you look at it in the bigger picture, they're just one tiny little temporary blip in our whole lifeline. Although we can't control when bad things happen to us, we can control how we try and deal with what happens and deal with our own emotions. So for me, despite I was not happy all of the time, I don't think anyone could be when all of this stuff happens, I was still able to smile and be positive for the future, like looking forward to going into school and planning to go out with my mates and stuff. And I was still grateful for the things that I did have, even if suddenly I didn't have my health anymore, because I didn't have my health, but I had access to amazing healthcare, and I live relatively close to BCH, unlike a lot of other patients who have to travel there. And I didn't have anyone really close to me who could relate to what I was going through, but my friends and family were so supportive, and they would just cheer me up regardless. So would it even really matter if they couldn't relate to me? I also have this really vivid memory, and I was talking to my mum about it last night. For the first part of my treatment, I was on a very high dose of steroids, and steroids give you a massive appetite. And so I had the munchies really, really bad. But while I was in hospital, I also missed my mum's cooking a lot, because hospital food is all right, but it's not home food. It's like spit grim. So my mum cooked me spaghetti bolognese, and I remember she just let me eat bowlful after bowlful of the spaghetti bolognese, and I think I kind of even forgot what was happening in my life at that point, because I was just in my happy place. I was just eating as much food as I wanted, Yeah. My next point, something else that is really important, and I think society as a whole, we all really underestimate, is just the importance of kindness, really. It is really impossible to assume how someone is doing behind closed doors, or how they're really feeling and their exact circumstances. So just a few words can really mean the difference between a good or a bad day. Whether this is literally just smiling at someone when you walk past, or like sending them a quick message to just ask how they are, just the tiniest actions in our eyes can make such a huge impact to somebody else. Again, I've always felt really lucky to have such incredible friends and family, but there were still times when I felt alone, and no one really knew what to say, and felt too scared to even ask how I am. Although I do think that is completely understandable, and had I not been the one that was ill, it was someone else in my shoes, I would have definitely been the same way. I'd be really awkward and not really know what to say. I have learned that it is okay to just straight up ask someone, how are you? And just offer to be there, because it can just really help eliminate that elephant in the room, and it breaks down those barriers, and then subsequently that just helps someone when everything around them has changed so much, it just helps them feel a little bit more the same as they were. And it becomes just, once you kind of just address that awkwardness straight up, because we are all awkward human beings, whether you like it or not, things become less awkward. And speaking of awkward, it can be really awkward when someone asks you, where do you see yourself in 5, 10, 15 years' time, and you have no clue whatsoever. Or if you're like me, you've had a life plan since you were little, and then suddenly you find that you've changed your mind, and the change in your mind is scarier than the fact you don't know what you want to do anymore. But something else I've definitely learned from this whole experience is you don't need to have a clear plan or just know what you want to do with your life just yet, because you can't really predict the future, and you need to just take each day as it comes and live every day separately, a fresh new start every single day. If you do have a plan, that's amazing, and there's literally nothing wrong with that at all. In fact, I'm kind of jealous a little bit myself. But if you don't, you need to remember you can never truly predict the future, so what is the point? I remember I used to be so anxious, worrying constantly about achieving the grades I wanted for my A-levels before I'd even applied to university, before I'd even gotten into year 13. I think I was end of year 12 when I'd first started having this really, really overwhelming anxiety around exams. And it was just because I was conscious of the fact I couldn't focus as well as I wanted, and I wasn't in school anywhere near as much as my peers. But it was just wasted energy, and the same principle applied for my GCSEs as well. Even if I got the grades that I wanted, I worried way too much, and I think although in me I did want to get the grades for me regardless, a lot of it was a really toxic kind of motivation and this unhealthy kind of just this unhealthy anxiety that was driving me forward to sit them on time when I was nowhere near healthy enough to do that. And also, as well as just you can't really predict the future, something unexpected could be coming your way, and you don't even know it. I never could have imagined ever doing public speaking, and I'm probably going really, really fast and babbling a lot because it terrifies me. It's scary. You're all right there. And let alone, I got this ad come up on Facebook in my friend's kitchen whilst we were cooking a pizza, and your life just turns out in a funny way. You can't predict what happens, and things turn out for the best in the end, I like to believe. But what am I doing now after all of this babbling and ranting? I'm 18, I didn't quite get the grades I needed in one subject for uni this year, and I'm on a very, very unplanned gap year. But I think I'm probably the happiest I've ever been in my life. I really don't want to sound cocky, because that's the least thing I want to sound, but I'm really proud of myself and everything that I've achieved, even if it's not good enough in someone else's eyes. One of the coping mechanisms I had when I'm looking back is that I used to focus on school and achieve the best grades possible just because I thought that maybe if I got the top grades, then all of these horrible few years, it could be justified in the long run and it could maybe mean something. But that didn't make me happy or make it worthwhile. Happy doesn't come from trivial things. It comes from living your life how you want to live it, and not by just about coping. This is the first time I think I've ever been able to think entirely for myself, because throughout school I was still on treatment, and then A-levels are just stressful enough regardless of ever having treatment. And it's just me thinking for myself. And I'm finally self-content. And even if I really don't know what I want to do in the future anymore, I think I'm happy where I am so far. And I'm just doing useful stuff like working, learning to drive, and trying to just take it from there, taking each day as it comes. Sounds a bit boring, but that's how I'm happy now. And I just want to say thank you for listening, because we are really lucky. If we're unsure of our futures, I count myself as lucky that I even have this much time to worry about, because I might not be here. The chances of me being here were so slim. So I think we all just need to be grateful for our time here and have as much fun as we can. So thank you for listening, guys.